Good afternoon, boys and girls. We're going to begin a new unit. It's called Domain 2, Classification of Animals. So we are lucky. We get to talk about animals for the next 3 or 4 weeks. I love that because I am an animal lover, just letting you know. I want to show some... Oops. Oh, recording a background tab. I don't know how to show these pictures. I was going to show you some pictures, but I don't know how to do it. So really, let me give you an introduction to this. I was going to give you cards. I was going to give you a card with a bird. I was going to give you a card with a fish, an amphibian, a reptile, a mammal, and an insect. I was going to show you all of those. And you have a chart in your book 2 that is an animal classification chart. We're going to be talking about all of these different animals and why we're classifying them in particular groups and what that even means to classify something. So, do you remember last year you studied which animal group has the very most members in it? You studied it for a long time. That's right, it's the insect group. Insects have 6 legs, some of them fly, some of them crawl, but they are the largest animal group as far as numbers go in the whole world. There are more different types of insects than any other type of animal. And you already got a chance to spend a good amount of time studying those last year, so they are not going to be included in what we are studying this year. We're going to move on and continue to study some different things. But with so many different kinds of animals in the world, it's helpful to put them into groups based on their characteristics. So when you or anybody, a scientist, a child, a student, a teacher, when we put things into groups, we are organizing them. We can organize ideas and living things. We can organize objects. And we are classifying them. So in order to classify living things, scientists put them into categories called kingdoms. We are going to be talking about 2 kingdoms, the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. But there are other kingdoms that you will learn about later on, like in 4th and 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. But the 2 kingdoms that we are going to talk about are plant and animal kingdoms. Now, I'm going to read a list of things to you. Some of them are plants, some of them are animals, and some of them are non-living things. If you think that the item that I say belongs to the plant kingdom, you're going to say plants. And if you think it belongs to the animal kingdom, you're going to say animals. And if you think they are non-living, I want you just to freeze and not say anything. Because you can't grow and you can't move if you're non-living. So here we are. The first one is lion. That's right, it's the animal kingdom. What about an oak tree? Plants. Rock. It's non-living. It's not a plant and it's not an animal. It might be covered with some type of plant if it has moss on it, but the rock itself is non-living. Turtle. Television. Grasshopper. Animal kingdom, plant kingdom, non-living. Dandelion. Worm. Water. Every living thing needs water. Water itself is non-living. Rose bush. That's right. Scientists can classify the kingdom of animals into smaller groups. We are going to be learning about some of those smaller groups in the animal kingdom as we move through our unit. When scientists organize animals into groups, they are organizing them according to particular characteristics that they have in common. By placing those into groups, scientists can study them. They can see relationships between them. For example, the mammal group includes animals that give birth to live babies, whereas the bird group includes animals that lay eggs. All right, I'm going to move on and we are going to begin reading. Do you recognize this guy? You met him in first grade. His name is, do you remember? Does anybody remember me? It's me, Rattenborough, animal expert and world traveler. We've explored lots of animal habitats together, haven't we? From hot savannas to cold Arctic regions. We've watched hungry carnivores eat their prey with very sharp teeth, while herbivores feast on grasses nearby. Today, I've got great fun in store for you. I'm going to present a slideshow, but before I do that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how scientists understand animals. Think about all the different types of animals on Earth. Grasshoppers, penguins, rabbits, lions, salmon, turtles, and salamanders. Those are just a few. What other animals can you name? I'm going to give you 1 minute. Name as many animals as you can. Ready? Go. Okay, that was not a whole minute, but I think you were probably able to name a lot of animals in that time. How do you tell those animals apart? How do you recognize them, or how do you identify those animals? One way that we make sense of our whole world is by sorting things into categories or groups. Not just animals, but for sure animals. Look closely at these pictures of a salamander and a squirrel and notice their characteristics. Can you name any ways that a salamander and a squirrel are alike? How are they different? What other characteristics do you think of to help sort animals into categories? When I look at this, I go, well, there's a front leg, there's a front leg. Here's an eye, here's an eye. This has gills. This has lungs underneath there. I happen to know that. Does the salamander have any fur? Nope. But the squirrel does. So in some ways, these animals are similar. They have similar characteristics, and in some ways, they are very different. In the mid-1700s, about 250 years ago, a Swedish man named Carolus Linnaeus became fascinated by the many different ways that people all over the world were grouping animals. Some people grouped animals by how they looked. Others grouped animals by their habitats. Still others by where animals lived. It was all a great mumbo jumbo. And Linnaeus decided to use their ideas to create a worldwide system to classify or group animals based on their characteristics. This science of classifying organisms is called taxonomy. That's a word you're going to need to know. So say taxonomy. Go ahead and say it out loud. Taxonomy. That's right. Taxonomy is the science of classifying organisms. Using new ideas and tools, scientists have continued to study organisms and the ways they are similar and different. Over time, ideas about how to classify animals have changed somewhat. Scientists currently recognize three groups of living organisms based on important parts within their cells. Scientists generally agree that these groups of organisms are then divided into kingdoms, the main groups into which all living organisms have been further classified. Plants and animals are the two kingdoms that I know the most about, and today I'm here to talk to you about my favorite one. That's right, the animal kingdom. Taxonomists identify animals by their characteristics. Characteristics are special features that set them apart from others. Let me read that sentence again because it's very important. It's packed full of important information. When you are doing reading and you come to a sentence that is packed full of information, read it a couple times. Taxonomists, scientists who classify living things, identify animals by their characteristics. Characteristics are special features that set them apart from others. They divide the 5 kingdoms into smaller and smaller groups, with each smaller group having more and more in common with one another. Each group has a specific name. For example, you and I not only belong to the same kingdom, the animal kingdom, but we both belong to the same phylum, the phylum known as Chordata, because we share similar body characteristics. Most animals in the phylum Chordata are vertebrates. A vertebrate has a backbone. Let me read that again. Most animals in the phylum Chordata are vertebrates. A vertebrate has a backbone. Do you have a backbone? Yes, you do. And so do I. That is one of our common characteristics, one of the ways that scientists group us to show relationships between us. My backbone, now remember this is the rat talking, Rattenborough. My backbone is smaller than yours because I'm much smaller. But if you look closely at this image, you can see how similar the bones are. Vertebrates, animals with a backbone. What's a vertebrate? An animal with a backbone. Don't forget it. It's really important. Vertebrates belong to the animal kingdom and are in the phylum Chordata. This phylum is divided into more groups called classes. A class is divided into smaller groups called orders. An order is divided into smaller groups called families. A family is divided into smaller groups called a genus. And a genus is divided into even smaller groups called species. There are many, many species within each group. A little more than 95% of all animals on the earth are invertebrates. That means they do not have a backbone. We have backbones. We are vertebrates. That's what a vertebrate is, an animal with a backbone. But most, 95 out of every 100 animals on the earth right now, do not have a backbone. They are invertebrates. Now that you know that a vertebrate is an animal with a backbone, what do you think an invertebrate is? Think about it. More than 95% of all the species of animals on Earth, that's a lot of invertebrates. Most of them are fairly small. Fewer than 5% of all animal species are vertebrates. Okay? 95 out of every 100 animals on Earth has no backbone. Fish have backbones, reptiles have backbones, birds have backbones, amphibians have backbones, and mammals have backbones. They're all vertebrates. That means that you and I and all vertebrates belong to a very small percentage of all the animals on Earth. Mammals, that includes all of humans, are literally just a little speck. Now that you've heard a little bit about how taxonomists sort animals into categories, I'm ready to begin the slideshow of my worldwide travels, and I'm going to teach you all kinds of amazing things about animals. I met the most wonderful new animal friends while I traveled the globe. And so throughout this domain, I will show you my slides so that you can meet them too. They represent 5 vertebrate groups of animals. 5 groups of animals that have, what's a vertebrate? An animal with a backbone. So 5 groups of animals with a backbone. As they are introduced, remember to think about how scientists might classify each one of my new friends. How is each one like you? And how is each one different from you? Okay. Here is Paulo, the piranha from Colombia. This is Tabitha Toad from Brazil. Anna Anaconda from Peru. Ebenezer Egret from South America. South Africa. And Hilda Hippo from Tanzania. Please welcome Paulo, Tabitha, Anna, Ebenezer, and Hilda to your classroom. They're going to appear from time to time in my slides as you learn about the 5 vertebrate groups of animals. Be sure to keep a sharp eye out for them. You never know when one of them might turn up. Aren't they a handsome bunch? They all belong to the animal kingdom, just like you and me. And they are like us in another way, too. They all have backbones. But now things get tricky. We are all animals. We all are vertebrates. But we are not all the same, are we? Heavens, no, we have a lot of differences as well. You and I belong to a class or group called mammals. What makes mammals different from other classes of animals is that they have fur or hair, and the mothers give birth to live babies and feed their babies with the milk that their bodies produce. You will learn more about these and other characteristics of mammals another day. My friend Hilda Hippo is indeed a mammal, even though it's hard to see the little bit of hair around her mouth and on the tips of her ears and tail. When I was in Tanzania, Hilda and I had a visit with a proud new mother hippopotamus. Look at her with her baby. So, I'm a mammal, you're a mammal, and Hilda is a mammal. But my other friends have different classifications. One of them is in the reptile class, a scaly creature that likes to warm itself in the sunshine, Anna Anaconda. Isn't she beautiful? She's one of the largest snakes in the world. And though she's not poisonous, her strong muscles help her constrict or squeeze her prey. Another of my friends is an amphibian, which means she lays eggs and lives both in and out of water. Most animals in the amphibian class have smooth, wet skin, but my friend's skin is rather dry and leathery. Who is she? Right again, Tabitha Toad. She looks a lot like her close relative, the frog, doesn't she? Her skin helps protect her as it's camouflaged or able to blend into the environment. My last 2 friends should be easy to classify because their classification names are much more common to all of us. Which one of my friends is a member of the bird class? Yes, Ebenezer Egret. Ebenezer is a warm-blooded vertebrate with feathers. Paulo Piranha is the last of my friends to be classified today. Which group does Paulo belong to? Paulo Piranha is a fish. He has fins and gills and lives in water. Piranhas, though small, are thought by many to be dangerous because of their very sharp teeth. Don't worry, Paulo, like many other piranhas, usually feeds on dead and injured wild animals. Taxonomists believe that all of the vertebrate animals on Earth can be classified into one of these 5 animal groups: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. In one of these 5 groups, there are 3 different fish classes. Fish also have the largest number of species among vertebrates. Even though there are more than 60,000 known species of vertebrates on Earth, there are nearly 1.5 million invertebrates, and 1 million of those are insects. scientists continue to discover thousands of new insect species every year. How can this be? There are still unexplored areas of the Earth far into the rainforest, inside the cold ice of glaciers, within the hot lava of volcanoes, and deep down in the ocean. Perhaps one day you will discover new animals yourselves, examine and classify them by their different characteristics, and add to our understanding of taxonomy. Let's think about what we have learned today. Scientists classify organisms, including animals, in order to show relationships between them. Animals are classified by common characteristics. Vertebrate animals have backbones, whereas invertebrates do not. Some are warm-blooded, whereas others are cold-blooded. Well, let's think about other ways that scientists might classify animals. It's important to consider where animals live, their habitats. Do they live in water? Do they live on land? Do they live in warm climates or cold climates? What covers their bodies? Feathers? Scales? Fur? Hair? Do they lay eggs? Or do they give birth to live creatures that look like smaller versions of themselves? What kind of food do they eat? Do they eat plants? Do they eat animals? Maybe both. These are all important questions for taxonomists to ask as they work to group animals into categories that are easily studied. In upcoming read alouds, you're going to learn much more about how animals are classified. Next time, we will pick up the slideshow so that I can teach you about the groups of animals to which Tabitha Toad, Anna Anaconda, and Paulo Piranha belong. Can anyone make a prediction about which of my friends are warm-blooded animals like me? You'll have to wait until next time to see if you are right. So, who is the narrator in our story? Who is telling this story? We're going to follow him around the world with his travels and meet his new animal friends. That's right, the narrator is Rattenborough the rat. He is telling the story. There are 5 groups of animals that are classified as vertebrates: amphibians, mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles. What's the main characteristic of these 5 groups of animals? What do they all have in common? They all have a backbone, which means they are all vertebrates. That word vertebrate, you're going to have to absolutely know exactly what it means. Okay. What are 2 kingdoms or large groups of organisms that you heard about today? We talked about the animal kingdom and we talked about the plant kingdom. Those are not the only kingdoms, but those are the only ones that we will be talking about in 3rd grade. There are more animal kingdoms that you will learn about later. Which kingdom is Rattenborough's favorite? The animal kingdom. Why do you think Rattenborough might especially enjoy members of the animal kingdom? He is an animal, for one. His friends are animals, for another. He eats plants, so maybe the plants, he looks more of the plants like dinner rather than friends. What are 2 important ways that scientists classify animals? We very briefly touched on this, but we're going to have a whole chapter on these things in just a minute. Cold-blooded, warm-blooded animals are ways that scientists classify animals. Vertebrate and invertebrate are ways that animals characterize and classify animals. But there are other characteristics that scientists use: body covering, live birth or lay eggs. Does an animal have lungs or gills? What does it eat? Where does it live? Those are all ways that scientists can classify animals. What are animals called that do not have a backbone? Test question. Invertebrates. And which invertebrate group contains the most number of species in the whole world? You studied them last year. Insects. All right, that is the end of our introduction to our new unit, classification of animals.